Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're putting on our detective hats and taking a forensic look at our current economic reality to understand exactly why everyday life has suddenly become so incredibly expensive. There is a whole lot of blame being thrown around out there right now, but very little accountability or clear explanation. So let's fix that right now. Everyone is constantly talking about how to fix the economy. But to find a real solution, we need to ask the absolute most vital question, the one that honestly gets overlooked when we talk about the financial strain on average folks. How on earth did we actually end up here in the first place? Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with 1, the cost of living crisis, then 2, turning on the money printer, and 3, understanding currency debasement. After that, we'll hit 4, the illusion of value, 5, how to fix the economy, and finally, 6, the strong currency paradox. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the cost of living crisis. Let's start with the pain I'm sure you're feeling right now, which is the undeniable reality of our current costs. Groceries, they've been skyrocketing since 2020. Property prices have risen way out of reach, and rents in capital cities are just staggering. Young people, low-income earners, and retirees on fixed incomes are really struggling to keep up with this. And the truly confusing part of the whole shebang, interest rates keep rising to supposedly cool down inflation, yet prices are still climbing far beyond what most people can cope with. Moving right along to Section 2, turning on the money printer. To find the real culprit here, we've got to rewind the clock a bit and look at the unique problem the government faced. Think back to 2020. Global lockdowns hit, people couldn't go to work, and the whole economy basically hit pause. But, bills don't just magically disappear. So the government stepped in. They distributed newly created money to support jobless citizens and struggling businesses. Then, in 2022, when the economy finally reopened, they were worried people would be too hesitant to go out and spend. So they printed even more money to incentivize spending, like literally handing out $200 rebates in Victoria just to get people to eat at restaurants. And what was the result of all that? Well, the crucial point is that in just 12 months, the country's money supply almost doubled. Doubled! You absolutely cannot halt an entire economy, pump that massive amount of new cash into the system, and not expect massive consequences. This giant influx of cash is the direct foundation of the cost of living crisis we are dealing with today. Which brings us to Section 3, understanding currency debasement. Now that we found the catalyst, we need to officially name our main suspect, currency debasement. This happens when a country's money loses its value, usually because the government creates way more of it than the economy can actually handle. When people ask, hey, why can't we just print endless money to solve everyone's problems? Well, this definition is exactly why. There are serious consequences when the world tries to go back to normal. I absolutely love these two everyday analogies because they perfectly explain the mechanics of having more money in circulation. Think of it like watered-down soup. If you keep adding water to a pot, the soup just gets weaker and weaker, right? Printing money works exactly the same way. It waters down the purchasing power of every single dollar in your wallet. Or picture a bread auction. If there's only one loaf of bread available, but suddenly every single bidder has twice as much cash in their pocket to bid with, the price of that exact same loaf is going to shoot straight up. So during COVID, we hit pause and pumped a ton of money in. But here's the crucial kicker. We didn't bake more bread. We didn't build more houses. We didn't produce additional goods. Production actually dropped. So when we finally hit play again, we suddenly had a tsunami of new money chasing the exact same amount of groceries, fuel, and houses. That extra cash demand is exactly what allowed sellers to start charging much, much higher prices. Let's look at what this really means in Section 4, the illusion of value. This requires a pretty massive perspective shift regarding how you view the value of the things you own. Read this quote carefully, because the honest truth is that a loaf of bread didn't suddenly become vastly more valuable at Kohl's or Woolies. Your home hasn't drastically increased in its intrinsic worth either. The reality? Your money simply isn't worth as much as it was 5 years ago. It's not that your house is worth more dollars. It's that your dollar literally buys less house. It's an incredibly painful illusion. So if we know the cause, how do we get out of this? Section 5, how to fix the economy. Mathematically speaking, to balance out all that extra money pumped into the system, the government has to take a few very specific steps. Step 1, rein in future spending. Step 2, offset the effects of all that newly printed money. For instance, if they print $20 million, they need to hold on to $20 million elsewhere instead of injecting it back in. And step 3, they have to maintain strict discipline and prevent any extra money from flowing until the entire economy naturally rebalances itself. But here is the catch. The math is super simple, for sure, but the political reality, it's a complete mess. The truth is, politicians usually avoid taking unpopular action, especially during an election year. Cutting spending means cutting programs, and let's be real, cutting programs doesn't win you votes. That makes a simple theoretical fix incredibly difficult to actually pull off in the real world. To really grasp that political nuance, let's head to Section 6, the strong currency paradox. Now, obviously, a weak currency hurts you at the grocery store, but a strong currency isn't always universally good news either. Take a look at this fascinating case study from back in 2013, when the Australian dollar was briefly worth more than the US dollar. The clear winners were everyday consumers. We got cheaper imports, things like iPhones, sneakers, and makeup. But the losers are exporters. Australia's beef and agriculture industries struggled immensely because our strong dollar made their products way too expensive for the rest of the world to buy. So what happened next? Well, heavy political pressure was applied by the farmers who just couldn't survive that high dollar. In response, the government intentionally printed more money, specifically to weaken our currency and protect those exporters. Keeping the dollar high was deemed totally off the table. And those everyday consumers enjoying cheaper sneakers at the mall, they simply weren't a consideration. It's a perfect example of how political pressure often overrides the immediate benefits to everyday folks. And that brings us full circle to wrap up this explainer. We know exactly what causes inflation. We know the mathematical steps required to drain that excess money out, and we know just how heavily political pressure sways these decisions. So, I'll leave you with this absolutely vital question to ponder. Will our politicians make the unpopular choices needed to fix the economy today? Definitely keep that in mind the very next time you hear a campaign promise to fix the cost of living. Thanks so much for joining me.